Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Bree and I am one of the PSU lecturers. I might be your online support lecturer, or I also am the lecturer in Gladstone. So if you're in Gladstone, I'm sure you know me by now. And I'm joined today by Trixie, who you'll all know is the unit coordinator this term, and Trix is going to help me out on chat. So let's get started this morning. As always, we respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we live, work and learn, and we pay our respects to the First Nations people and their elders past, present and emerging, and according great respect to their knowledge and wisdom. So I'm on the land of the Gurrang, the Gurrang, the Byili and the Tarrabalang Bunda peoples here in Gladstone. I think because we have all the crossings of rivers, we're very lucky to have a lot of traditional owner groups here. Okay, so welcome to week 3. We are learning all about learning styles and personality types today. So the aim of the game is that I'll hopefully be able to give you a bit of understanding about what these terms mean and how we can use them to our benefits. I'll just give you a warning at the top. There's a lot of terminology and definitions in this lecture. So if you've got a pen and paper or your computer or whatever you're using to take notes, sometimes it really helps to put down those definitions because there's just a few little tricky ones in here that I'll point out. So word of warning at the top. We're also going to talk about how these preferences and traits might impact on your past learning experiences, whether that be in a positive or a negative way. And probably, in my opinion, most importantly, we're going to give you some strategies to help you learn and move forward. So why are we examining learning styles and personality traits? So something that is important to us in STEPS is to sort of give you a really great learning experience. And often people come to STEPS without that. Not always. Some people have had good learning experiences as well. But we do notice often that our STEP students come here and they maybe have had difficult classroom experiences at school, or the learning may not have necessarily worked for them. And we are big believers in that, you know, anyone can learn, obviously, but it's just the way we learn might be different. So we've got to work to that, and to better understand yourself often helps you to be a better learner and be able to put things in place. So hopefully, after learning a bit about your learning styles and personality types, you'll be able to sort of do a bit of reflection, look back at some of these learning experiences and maybe understand why they were positive and negative, and then be able to put strategies in place to make them all a bit more positive. So that's all about developing your learning potential. So understanding the way you learn means that you can become an effective learner. It's a bit hard to be effective if you don't really know how. It's one of those classic, you don't know what you don't know. So that's one of our other aims today, is to be able to help you understand and therefore be able to develop your learning as you go along and take your knowledge and go a little bit deeper into your potential. So we want to obviously develop that deeper self-awareness. And another bonus, and I think this one's really important, and I really focus on this in my class actually, is understanding where others are coming from. So although it's understanding yourself, it's also understanding others. I'm sure you're all adults, you all would have encountered this, but often there's a bit of teamwork out there in the world, whether that's in the workplace or at uni, you're going to need to work in a team. So being able to understand others and see their perspective can really help to manage teams effectively and hopefully get around some of the conflicts that often happen. So that's another reason we're hoping to sort of broaden your worldview. So I think we've already had an endorsement this morning from Monique. So that's always nice. Monique said in the chat how she really enjoyed this module, but this is another one from a past student who also really enjoyed the self-awareness aspect and felt that they sort of had a few aha moments and sort of questioning moments. So hopefully this is the same for everyone else. But before we get started, sort of talking about you and your learning styles and preferences, we're going to take a step back and do a little bit of history. So part one, we're going to look at the Solomon-Felder learning styles. So this fellow over here is Richard Felder, and he, along with Barbara Solomon, who is very tricky to find a photo of, that's why she's not there, they developed this Solomon-Felder learning styles. So what happened was Felder was working in the engineering area with engineering students, and he sort of observed that some students worked in different ways or preferred different ways of learning. So sort of in the 1980s, he got really interested in this sort of educational learning styles. So he teamed up with Barbara Solomon, who was already working in that sort of education area. And together they developed what's now known as the Index of Learning Styles. So that was in 1999, so a little while ago now. And let me show you. This is what it looks like. So you can see here, it's sort of a scale across here, the different indexes. There are two opposing styles on each. So you can see at the top there, there's active and reflective, then there's sensing and intuitive, visual, verbal, and finally sequential and global. So these are a continua. So just to stress here that people aren't often like one or the other. That's the whole point. It's sort of you're somewhere on the continua in there. You're not always active or always reflective or completely one or completely the other. It sort of depends. You're somewhere in the middle. We're all individuals and we all sort of have different styles. So we're somewhere in there. So if you're looking at these and think, oh, well, I'm not one or the other completely, that's okay. Now, I'm going to go through one by one and explain these a little bit more, but some of you just from reading these words might sort of have a sense or already be predicting where on this scale you might sort of land. And if that's the case, it's probably not a bad idea to just jot it down on your notes, and you can come back and see if that is the case, if your first feeling was correct after we've gone through these definitions. So, learning styles are preferences. So what I mean by a preference is that there are characteristic strengths and preferences in ways people take in and process information. So that's the definition from Felder from 1996. And we're all, as I said, all different, all have different preferences. Now, I just want to spend just a quick sec talking about the word preference, just to be clear. So a little asterisk there on preference before we start our activity. So I always love this. I've stolen this from Helen Holden, who's another teacher in our STEPS PSU team, but I think it's a great sort of example. So a preference is something you prefer. So anyone who knows Gladstone, we are on the Marina campus, and to get to the campus, there is a bridge that lifts to let all the boats through. So it's pretty cool, lifts up, boats go through it. Now, this bridge it looks very good, but it's a bit temperamental. So sometimes it gets stuck. So because we all live over the bridge in town, our preference is to just simply cross the bridge and get to work. That's our preference. It's quickest, it's easiest, great way to get to work, preference. But on days when that lovely bridge goes up and then fails to go down again, despite our preference to get to work over the bridge, sometimes we've got to do the round trip and come in at the other end. So you've sort of got to go down a big long road and around and through, and it's a bit of a maze, and there's a couple of 40K zones. That's annoying, but we've got to do it. So that's what I mean by preference. These things will be a preference to you. You might prefer them, but the world is not perfect. So sometimes you're going to have to go the long way around. Sometimes we're going to have to do something that isn't our first preference. So just keep that in mind while we're going through these activities, that this doesn't dictate who you are or who someone else is. You don't have to always operate this way. We're not that fixed as people. Okay, boring stuff out of the way. Let's do some fun stuff. So we're going to do this on the screen as well, but I also want you to do it in your notebook or your laptop or your iPad, whatever you're using as your notes. I want you to draw me a scale. So you can see here, just a line with a few little dashes through it. On one side, strong preference, then medium, mild, middle is balance, and then a strong preference, medium, mild on the other side. Because remember, it's a continua. We've got one on the one side, one on the other. So we're going to, as we go through, I want you to jot these down in your book, just so you've got them. We're also going to do it on the screen because I do love using annotations. So if you're on your phone, your annotation button should just be down here, down the bottom. If you're using a computer, you should be able to go up to view options, and then there's an annotate button there. So you can sort of draw and stamp and stuff on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and explain each of these concepts. Oh, look, people are all over it. I've got a smiley face. Beautiful. People know what they're doing. So I'm going to go through and explain each of their concepts. And then on the screen, I want you to use the annotate tool to mark where you are on that continua. I also want you to do it in your book because I'm going to clear these after each go, so you're not going to know. Okay, so let me clear all from this screen. Okay, let's start with active and reflective. This is probably the easiest one to understand. So active learners are more hands-on, experimental. They like to sort of get in, have a go, sort of play with things to understand things. That's an active learner. Someone who's a bit reflective might look at an activity or a concept and they just want to sort of sit back, think about it, take it in before they'd make the leap and start sort of getting hands-on. So they like to think about it a bit more, reflect. So everyone, use whatever, whether you want a little symbol or a line, and pop on there which one. If you think you're sort of in the middle, maybe you're at the active end, maybe you're at the reflective end. Look at all these lines. Excellent. Lots of lines, lots of love hearts, lots of stars. While everyone's doing that, did we have anything in the chat, Tricks, I needed to address? Nope, all good for now.
Sorry, trying to find the unmute button. Nope, everything's fine in there.
Cool. Oh, we've got lots of active learners down this end. Oh, quite a few people in the middle, a few reflective. But yeah, active seems to be taking it out today. It's funny, every term it's different. Very good. All right. So I'm going to clear this one, everyone. Make sure you've noted down your preference in your notes yourself as well, because I'm going to clear it. So we don't want you to forget. It's good to keep this. So let me clear all. All right. Yep, I missed one. There we go. Okay, next up. We have sensing and intuitive. So this one's, we're getting a bit more difficult to understand, but sensing people quite like facts, logical details, processes, those sorts of things. Intuitive people sort of like abstract theories, concepts, gray areas, those sort of making those connections. So this one can be a bit hard to understand, but I'm definitely much more of an intuitive learner. It might help you to think about what sort of subjects and things you like. So I've always been really interested in like English and art and those sorts of humanities areas. And I really like grey areas. My husband finds this very annoying because he is a hard sensing person and he likes facts and logic, whereas I've always not minded things to be a bit in the grey. I don't mind. And yeah, whereas people who might be a bit more, not necessarily, but sometimes if you're a bit more mathsy or a bit more sciencey and you like a hard answer, so you might be more on the sensing scale. Oh, so we've got some people in the middle, but lots of sort of hard sensing people and a few intuitive people. So just keep in mind though too, this is just sort of how you might understand or approach the world. an intuitive person, it's not like they can't understand facts, obviously. And a sensing person, it's like they're not completely opposed to grey. It's just that you prefer one, or you're more comfortable in one than the other. Okay, very good. Quite a few sensing people, but not too strong one way or the other. Okay, everyone, I'm going to clear all of these. Make sure you've noted it down for yourself. Okay, next up, we have visual and verbal. So someone who's a bit more visual, graphs, images, tables, charts, you know, the drill, that sort of stuff. Verbal people might be a bit more written, spoken words, like written instructions, like things maybe explained to them verbally. So I always think this one's a bit tricky. I quite like both, but maybe I just need extra help. But that's okay. Some people, yeah, are in the middle, whereas some people really like, I've come across a few verbal learners who really want something explained verbally to them. Like they look at a chart and they're like, oh, it's confusing. I want that. I want you to tell me, talk me through it. And then some people are the opposite. They're like, shush, Brie, show me how this works. Give me an example. Show me a table. But there's, yeah, a few people in the middle. But some outliers there on the outside. Oh, there's another Brie here in the middle too. Us Bries think alike. Okay, so again, note this one down because I'm going to erase it. So make sure well, a couple of people, I'll let a couple of people finish, but then I'm going to erase it. So make sure you've written down what you think in your notepad, in your iPad, whatever you've got there in front of you. Okay. Next up, we have sequential and global learners. So possibly the pictures here, I hope, will help you understand this a little bit. So sequential, they like those step-by-step sort of sequential linear detail. That's how they like to figure things out, like one by one by one. Global are big picture people. They like to see the big picture, the big why. I always think of this, I'm a bit more sequential, and I used to work with a lovely, lovely lady who was very global. And I think we actually worked together well because she always thought of these big, great ideas and how, you know, this thing was going to work and from the big picture. And I was that annoying person that was like, okay, great, but what's step one? What do we do first? Where do we start? What's the process here? So sometimes those global and sequential people work together quite well because you've got someone who can see the big outcome, which can be a bit tricky for me to see that big outcome, but it's good to have a global learner who can really see that. And then you've got the other person who can go, okay, great, I see the big picture, but what are the little details? What's step one? So it's sort of a nice combination. I think we were talking before we started recording this about how opposites sometimes attract. And I think this is a nice example of that. Because sometimes if everyone was sequential or everyone was global, it would be pretty hard to get anywhere. I think if I didn't have global people in my life, I'd be back here too busy worrying about the minute details and, you know, how we're going to make a flow chart to make this work. So it's nice to have a balance. And then some people are a bit of both. And I always really am impressed by these people that can sort of see the big picture, but also the little steps. So I see a few of you are like that. So that's good. Okay, last clearing of the drawings. So make sure you've noted what you think down. Let me clear. Oh, just let a couple of people. Okay, clear all. So the Solomon and Felder inventory, you can find this link on Moodle and it will take you to this sort of, I wouldn't call it a quiz as such because it's not like there's a wrong or a right answer, but it's just sort of you go through and answer the questions, how they relate to you. Now, it can be a little bit frustrating because they're a little bit like you've got to choose one or the other. Honestly, this whole practice is just to get to know yourself a little better and to understand your learning. So don't overthink this. Don't like over worry about this. Just read it and think the first thing that sort of comes. So these are some examples where it's one or the other. So I understand something better after I try it out, think it through. Just the first one that comes to your mind, I'd probably say, try it out, like to have a go, fiddle with it a bit, and then take a step back. Whereas I know other people might like to do the opposite. They want to think it through before they break it. Okay, so this is what it will look like. Like I said, just initial reactions. Don't mediate on this. Now, when you have gone through and had a go at that inventory, you're going to end up with a scale sort of like this. So you can see here, active, reflective, sensing, intuitive, visual, verbal, sequential, global. Now, a lot of people, when they get to this point, go, oh my gosh, I'm in the middle. Like, can you see this person? They're quite in the middle of sequential. They're getting close-ish to the middle in these two as well. But that's okay. Don't completely freak out if you're in the middle. It's not a bad thing or a good thing to be high in one or the other or in the middle. In the middle can be good in a lot of ways, because maybe if you're both visual and verbal, you are lucky enough to be able to sort of learn in both ways comfortably. Same with, like I said, about sequential and global. I'm always impressed by those people that can see both the big and the little. So not a bad thing. Don't worry. Like I said, this is to just help you sort of broaden your views, think about your personality, your learning a little bit more. So don't stress if you're in the middle, but also don't stress if you're more one or the other. If you're really active, great. Know that, use it to your advantage. So it's not something you need to worry about. Also, just to reiterate, these are preferences. I'm sure most of you who might be active learners, if you had to be, you can turn on that reflective switch and be a bit more reflective. And also, these are learnt things. We can learn to be better at one or the other over time, depending what we're learning or what profession we're in or what we're studying at uni. So this is just to give you an idea of your preference, not necessarily your ability. So keep that in mind. Okay, so before I move on to our next part 2, does anyone have any questions about the Solomon-Felder inventory or about any of this we've covered? You can pop it in the chat or yell out. Have I stunned everyone into silence?
There's no questions on the chat.
Beautiful. Okay, so part 2. So we're going to be looking at 2 different sort of learning personality testings. The first one we looked at, Solomon-Felder. Next up, we're going to look at personality types. So you might have come across this before, these 16 personality types, and they can sort of influence your learning, but also how you interact with people. So that's also important. I'd like to point out that I love this picture because I'm an ENFJ, and that makes me a knight in this, and I am a knight by name, so that amused me quite a bit. Just to throw that in. I was like, this is great, it knows me. Okay, so a little bit of history to start us off. So this version that we're going to be using is a Jung typology, but you might have also heard of it as the Myers-Briggs. So Carl Jung introduced the theory of personality types or archetypes originally. And then from there, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which you might have heard of before, lots of workplaces use this, or it might be referred to as the MBTI, was created by Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers, which was a mother-daughter team. And they developed this during World War II, which was really interesting because one of the motivations for developing this was to try and help women who were entering the workforce. So if you know anything about history in World War II, a lot of men obviously went off to fight in the war, and that meant that a lot of jobs had to be filled by women for the first time. So in that case, these women had potentially not really been in the workforce. Often they'd been at home raising kids and doing those household tasks. So when World War II came along, it was a bit tricky to sort of figure out, okay, well, what are these women's skills? What are they good at? What jobs can we pop them in? So the sort of Myers-Briggs type indicator was born, and it sort of helped to decide what sort of roles those women went into in the workplace. So I'll talk about this more at the end about both of these sort of indicators, but the Myers-Briggs has come with criticism, and so has the Solomon-Felder inventory, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. Despite that, it is still widely used. And like I said, in our case, we're going to be using the Young Typology quiz, which is based on the Myers-Briggs test and is also available just like the Solomon-Felder inventory on Moodle. So there's a link there in the week 3 module. Okay, so we are going to do the same thing as we did last time, just a little bit different. So again, I want you to note down in your own notes for your own understanding and to look back on later. I want you to draw me a little scale like this one here. But in this case, you're going to have very much like me, and then sort of in between, sort of one way or sort of the other. And I'm going to go through each of the categories one by one, note them down on your own notes, and also you can annotate on the screen. So just a heads up, there's some terms in here that are very specific to this Myers-Briggs or Young typology. So just listen carefully, make sure you've fully understood them before you make any decisions. So our first question that this typology, this personality testing asks is where we get our energy from. So these are common terms, these two to start with, but that's asking, do we get it from our own inner world or do we get it from the outer world? So someone who is an extrovert is going to probably get it from their outside world, spending time with people. That gives them energy, makes them feel fulfilled and good. Whereas someone who's a bit of an introvert possibly is more, you need time alone, you need to sort of sit back, take a little time. I'm just going to bring up another one here and go through some points. Sorry, you can start annotating as I go. But so someone who's a bit of an extrovert, is more talkative, enjoys socializing with people, might get a bit lonely, really energized by the outside world. Someone who's an introvert, is more reflective, bit of a listener, likes a bit of quiet, likes to re-energize on their own. Everyone's everywhere today. Got a few in the middle though. So now when you think about these, just think about it a touch more deeply than just, do I like being with people? Do I like, being by myself? Because often people can be a bit, it can be a bit deceiving because you've got to think about where you get your energy from. So I know plenty of people who from the outset, I would think they were extroverts, like they were more extroverted, because, they're very friendly, they've got lots of friends, they're out there, they're talkative, they enjoy socializing, but they need their space. Like that's not where they get their energy. They might really enjoy it. They might have a lot of friends and go out a lot, but they also on a Sunday afternoon like to just sit down by themselves, have a moment, re-energize. And the opposite might be true. I've come across plenty of people who might be a bit shy or a bit quiet, and you might think, oh, well, they're introverted, but not necessarily. You can still be a shy person and still get your energy from spending time with people. So yeah, it's a bit tricky. It's not as straightforward. I don't know. You might have seen, these are quite common terms. You might have seen them on the internet. And often it's like, oh, shy, outgoing, but it's not that simple. Okay. Going to clear. I've lost my annotate clearing button. Where is it? There we go. Oh, no. Try again. Okay. Our next one is how we gather information. So, do we gather it through our senses or through our ideas? So I'll explain these a bit further in a sec, but do you think, just from this brief definition, sensing or intuition? not 100% sure. People are a bit, oh. These terms are a touch trickier, but you might notice we're coming across this sensing term again. So there is a bit of a crossover between the Solomon-Felder inventory and the Young typology. Okay. I'm just going to clear this for a sec and go, where is it? There we go. And give you a touch more info. So someone who is sensing, they like sort of more practical, realistic specifics, focusing again on those facts and details. That might sound familiar from the Solomon-Felder inventory. Someone who's a bit more intuitive is probably someone who might be described a bit as a daydreamer. They like to sort of think abstract ideas through, think of future possibilities. These can often be big picture people. So it's all about how we sort of gather our information. Neither's like good or bad, but it's just different. We're all different. And some people, like this person is our lovely love, heart and stars, is probably a bit in the middle, and that's fine. Just a reminder too, to make sure you pop these down in your notes so you've got them. I always think it's good to sort of see how your assumptions about yourself, if they play out when you actually do these quizzes. Okay. It's a very mixed result on this one. It's always interesting. All right, clear all of those. Our part 3 of our personality types is how we make decisions. So, are we a facts person or are we a feeling person? Do we think things through or do we go on our feelings? Oh, quite a few thinking people. I love that some people are so far on the thinking scale. They're like off the thinking scale. they're over here thinking all the things. And same with the feelings. Someone way on the feeling over there. That's great. Quite a few in the middle. Yeah, I think that can be common, people to have a bit of both. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to clear that one. I'm going to give you a bit more detail. So, someone who is thinking might be described as a bit like tough-minded. You might have heard that saying, like use your head before your heart, a bit of objective, a bit impersonal, logical, quite rules-based. Whereas someone who's feeling might be a bit of the opposite, sort of more heart before head, might be a bit more personal, passionate, value, judgment sort of person. I want to stress too, again, these things actually work well together. Like they're not a good or a bad, they're a balance, sort of a yin and yang, I guess. Like I've seen this happen time and time again. I used to work in a team where there was one gentleman who was very much a thinker and the other lady I worked with was very much a feeling person. And we used to implement like a lot of new systems and things. And the gentleman I worked with was a real thinker. He was like, okay, this is what we've got to do. This is the objective. This is how we implement it. And the other lady, it was a perfect balance because she was the feeler. She was like, great, we do have to do this, but how will it affect people? Will this make people's lives harder? Will this upset them? What do we need to put in place to make it easier for the people we're going to impact? So I think that's really good to, like I said, there's neither bad or good. There's sort of a balance. So it's often nice to have someone to rein the other side in. So it's good to be a bit of both and to have both in a team as well. Okay. I'll just clear that little last one. Make sure you're noting these down. Last but not least, and this one, listen carefully because the terminology here gets a bit weird. I'm warning you now. So this is about how we organize our world. So is everything organized, in place, under control, Or is it more of a wait and see approach? So these in this young inventory or this this personality testing, we call it judging and perceiving. Now, judging is just a bit of a tricky word. So just to be clear, in this case, we don't mean like if you're judging, you're judgmental. It more means that you're a deadline person. You're good at organizing. You're good at, I like to think of it as you're good at judging how much time will be needed to complete a task. So you're good at judging those, you know, decisions that need to be made and how much time needs to be given to that thing or that, you know, time frame. So you're good at, judging your future capacity to do things. So not judging as in like you're judgmental. So just keep that in mind, means something different. Lots of people sort of in the middle, sort of one way or the other. It's funny because I think this is often the one where people are one or the other. Okay, I'm going to clear this for a second just to give a bit more detail. So judging, product orientated, like schedules, lists. They like to have an outline. They like an agenda. They've got goals in mind. They're really organized. They want to finish tasks and have closure. Perceiving people, they're a bit more go with the flow, you know, a bit more open and spontaneous. They don't like to be, you know, too limited by, you know, deadlines and agendas. Sometimes they might have a bit difficulty making decisions. So it's just how we organize ourselves. Again, neither's better or worse. A combination in a team is often really good. But yeah, it's just really how you organize your world and how you like things to be organized and how it flows for you. But to be clear, judging different to judgmental. So someone's a procrastinator there. That's great. Okay. So again, a few perceiving, a few judging, a few in the middle. Make sure you note these down for your own information. Okay. So let me clear all of these drawings. Sorry, everyone. So I can get to the next one. Okay. So just from that, just from having a look and having a think, does anyone know what they think their results already going to be? There's 16. I'm sorry, these colors are a touch offensive on this slide. So that's a bit much for you, but yeah, this just gives you a bit of a idea. So pop it in the chat or yell out if you sort of think, oh, tick it. Good. A few people are ticking theirs. Yeah, if you think you know. Look, it might be different when you actually do the quiz, but
Here we go. We've got a few popping them up on the chat here now.
oh yes, very good.
So far, a lot of introverts. Very interesting. Brody, I think you got your code wrong. Have a look at it again. ISF something. It's not an A. It'll be a J or a P. ISTJ Joel. Yep, Guardian. There you go. A few of them know their codes, which is good, which means they've already been in and done it. That's great.
Look at you
That's
go.
it better. That's it, Brody. It's such an interesting one. I just on a side note, when it comes to these temperament types, I absolutely love Kiersey's explanations. And I always talk to this, even in my class. I just love the way Kiersey explains these temperament types and more as a holistic understanding. You know, so if you students just want to expand your understanding, go and have a look at the Kiersey website and just read. But remember, we don't want to see that explanation in your learning portfolio. It's just meant to give you a little bit more depth around what these codes are.
Yeah.
How do people... Robin has just asked, how do people get marks on their screen? Sorry, Robin, that was back at the start of this presentation, and Bree just showed you there's an annotate tool.
Yeah.
And you just click on that annotate tool and you can do it. So
it sort of looks like a little pen.
Yeah.
for pencil.
We'll try and bring it up for you next time so that you can do it next time.
Anything else of note, Trix, before I?
No, just a lot of, like I said, surprisingly, a lot of introverts. There's not actually too many extroverts in this group so far that have popped their chat up, unless there's a few that have popped up on the screen.
There's a couple down here.
One, actually, if you look at that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Now that's it from the chatty.
Wonderful. Thanks, Trix. Okay, I'm going to clear all of this. Again, note these down, what you think. It's sometimes fun to sort of get an idea of what you think the results might come out with. And then when you go to do the actual quiz, you can see, compare and contrast. So this young typology that you're going to do looks a bit like this. So it's set up a bit differently than the Solomon-Felder inventory. So you can see here, you've got yes, sort of yes, uncertain, sort of no, no. I love how they do like the capitals, like yes, no. So yeah, one end's yelling at you, one end's sort of not. So go through. Now, again, don't overthink this. Just what your first response is generally a good answer. Also, just be mindful of trying to pick one. So if you do too many uncertains, it obviously can't really come up with anything. So try and pick one or the other. So just think about your regular day-to-day life. So even with the first one, you're almost never late for appointments. So think, am I often late or am I not? Just pick one or the other. Also, just read the questions a bit carefully. Some of them are worded a bit strangely. So just, yeah, do a careful read of those ones. And if you have any trouble with any of these, either this quiz or the Solomon-Felder one, feel free to reach out to your support lecturer or your on-campus lecturer. So just note that. Okay, sorry everyone, I'm clearing your stuff.
They're trying to do it on screen now.
I know. Sorry, stop it. No more annotations for a second. Okay, so just a bit of a caveat I told you that I'd get to. So there are quite a few criticisms of learning styles and personality profiles. There is a lack of scientific evidence. It's often tricky to sort of get scientific evidence on these sorts of things. There's also a lot of criticism around categorizing students into these rigid ideas. Now, just a note here, that is not what we want to do here. We sort of want to think of this broadly. Like I said about preferences, this is just to get you thinking about how you might tackle your learning or how you might work with others. It's not about putting you in a box and being like, okay, you're a sensing person and therefore that's all you can do. Completely untrue. We are all complex beings. And when we get a bit further actually into our term, we're going to talk to you a bit more about brain-based learning and things like that. And in there, you'll learn more about how, the brain works and can learn new things and make new connections. So this isn't like trying to pigeonhole you, I promise. We really just like to sort of think about it broadly. I did, the first time I did, it was a Myers-Briggs test, was for a work event years ago. And it honestly really helped me to understand the other people I worked with. So I'm a judging person, I have the judging trait. I am organized. I like things in their place. I like to follow rules. I like lists. That's sort of my personality. And for a long time, I found it really difficult when people weren't like that. I was just like, why? Why do you not understand me? Why too are you not making a detailed list of the tasks we need to complete? And it really used to just confuse me. And it actually helped on this staff retreat. We all did it. And then there was a few people on the team who were perceiving. And I was like, oh, it's just a completely different way of thinking. They just don't think like me. And that's fine. And that actually made me feel a lot better about it because I wasn't constantly trying to project my own views or my own way of thinking. So if you can get something out of it like that, that's what we're hoping for. We're not hoping that you put yourself in a box. We're hoping that you can look at this broadly and look at it and how it relates to other people. I think at the start, we had a bit of a chat before the recording about partners and how your partner might be opposite to you. So it might even help you in that, not just in a learning, like in a steps way, in a student way, but maybe get your partners to do it. Maybe it'll help you there too, to understand them a little bit more. So yeah, that's what we're hoping for, not putting you into any box preferences. So just further to that, we don't really, I keep saying sort of quizzes and tests, but they're not really. It's set up like a quiz. They're more like a tool. There's something to get you thinking about yourself, thinking about others. There's no better one, like there's not a right or a wrong learning style or personality type. They're all fine. They're all the same. It's just, they're all much of a muchness. They're just different ways of seeing the world. So that's okay. And again, their preferences, and they can change. Like, we're not all fixed beings. Some people go on who aren't necessarily really logical, fact-based people, go on to work in really logical, fact-based areas and really develop those skills, or vice versa. So it's really about learning about yourself and making some positive sort of connections and finding out ways to do things differently. And last but not least, they can't be used as an excuse. So you can't be that person that's like, oh, well, I'm a visual learner, so I can't possibly listen to you explain something. I have to see it. Like, I can't. Like, you can. We're all capable of change. We're all capable of doing things if we have to do them. Obviously, it's nice to know that there might be different tools out there to help you, or it might be like, okay, right, I'm more of a visual learner. I need to myself go out and find more visual ways to understand things. So it's a tool for you to use, not an excuse. So there are a few of the limits. Again, just some caution, don't lock yourself into any. It's a bit of a, like I said earlier, yin and a yang. They complement each other. So they complement them. All these traits complement each other in teams, in families, in student study groups. They're not a bad thing. It's good to be a little bit different. We'd all be very boring if we were the same. And like I said, often it helps with awareness of others. So I don't know if anybody knows this show. It was a pretty big one back in the day. But this is a picture from the Big Bang Theory. And often on TV shows, they really use these polar opposite personality types to make, some drama or make things a bit funny. So they often, sort of put extremes together, and in this case you've got Sheldon and Penny, who are quite extreme ends of the scales. So they often use that for dramatic effect, but in the real world we often can compromise and adapt and use people's strengths. We don't always have to butt heads, but it does make for good TV. So that's why they often use it in those sorts of those sorts of comedy or drama series. So once you've done we've worked through the module, you've done these quizzes, you might like to pop your thoughts in the forums. So this is from a previous term, an online student that talked about how they enjoyed it and they were a bit nervous about posting, which people often are, but don't be nervous. We'll be nice, I promise. But as the student says, it is important to participate in these activities, especially if you're online. It can help you feel a bit more like you're in a class, in a group. And yeah, pop in your thoughts, your results if you're comfortable. You might want to tell us if you think they're accurate, or if you think, no, not quite right. Yeah, pop that in the forums on Moodle. We love to have a read of those. So, as I said at the start, we like to use these tools also to think of past learning experiences and how they may have played out. So we've got a couple of minutes left, so we'll do this activity quickly. So have a think about a learning experience that you really enjoyed. So it can be lots of things. It doesn't have to be school. It could be learning to cook at home, something you've got good memories of. And if you feel comfortable about it, feel free to share it in the chat. Tell us why it was good and what you might have enjoyed about it. Have a think. Hint there to focus on examples that are the activity themselves, not so much the teacher. What was it about that activity you liked? I'll give you a sec to think about that.
Just waiting to see if any pop up on our chat.
Yeah, takes a minute to think about these.
I think the key with this one too is to take the personality out of it. Sometimes too, we tend to align something to a personality or to a person's personality. It can be positive or negative. To think about taking that personality out of it and looking at the actual event. Here we go. So Hannah's got studying methods at uni last semester. I enjoyed having a one-on-one tutor. There you go. That's good. Learning how to learning how to take care and grow my orchids. Very good. It's a real learning, trial and error type of learning.
Yeah.
Brock, I enjoy learning dance numbers because there's a lot of visual copying from the choreographer, yes, which helps me understand the routine. Very good. It's very visual and hands-on too, active. You're sort of watching and actively doing it. Oh, Amy, when maths problems clicked for me, that's great. Kat, one learning experience I enjoyed was the understanding of those around me and their personality types in comparison to myself. Perfect for this module, isn't it? Learning that yin and yang in them actually are around every day, work, partner, family. Yeah, beautiful. So there you go. Tio, maths, for example. Yep, enjoyed operations. Learning Japanese from Hannah. Engineering college, yes, great. Oh, Chelsea, learning how to do entomology, thank you, and taxidermy.
Oh, wow.
Thanks for those big words. I enjoy the steps involved for the final result. How interesting. Great. And Molly loves being a veterinary nurse, love learning new stuff every day, tests of potential. Oh, Kyle, oh, yes. If this is cooking any meat as a roast to perfection with MasterChef boss level results. Well done. Learning the specials recipes for the week, pushing my boundaries, never stagnating, always evolving, having responsibility over section. Good on you, Kane. Always evolving. Learning to code, says Rory. Great, because it's really logic-based. That's so good that you've actually recognised that.
Made that connection.
Yes, and also square dancing with family because it was fun. That's so lovely. And Brodie, 2-day seminar on leadership styles. That sounds very interesting with heaps of enlightening TED Talks and hands-on work. I love it. Very good.
Excellent. Lots of really positive experiences there.
So many. This is great.
Yeah. And everyone, just a hot tip, it might be worth just noting that these down as you're going. If you think of a positive experience, you can also note it down in your notes, not just the chat. So you've got it. And it's really good. I can't remember who it was in there. I'm sorry. But the person who spoke about coding and they made that connection.
Rory.
That. Oh, Rory, good job. That connection.
That's a great connection to his learning styles too. A really good connection, Rory. Tip.
Yes, hint, hint, everyone. Excellent. Okay. So we'll move on from our really enjoyed ones. What about something you didn't really enjoy? So think of a time where you were taught something. It can be anything. Again, it doesn't have to be school stuff that maybe wasn't as enjoyable. Again, not thinking about the teacher as such or who taught you this, but more about the learning experience, the thing you learned, and maybe how that interacts with your learning styles or personality types. Give you all a minute to think about that.
Interesting, Hannah. English because it isn't logic-based. And it's so true because, for some of us, we love English. We just love that, the capacity just to write, and it's out there, it's messy, it's fun. Yeah. But, we probably struggle, some of us struggle with maths more so, the logic side of things. So it's good that you've made that connection, that you didn't enjoy that because of that logic. You're more logical.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of us sitting there thinking, yeah, I can see that. Here we go. Here's some more. Yeah, Robin, when there's a subject you're not personally interested in and you can't apply it to yourself. And I'd be really interested to note, are you an idealist? When I say that, in your temperament type, are you an NF? Is that in your coding? Just, you can throw that back and tell me if it is or not. Brock, you didn't enjoy learning during COVID?
Trixie,
yeah.
we were just going to say that some of our students on Bundy campus said
Yeah.
that exact thing. And particularly some of the foundational stuff they were maybe doing in that maths science space, that was a real challenge for them to embed that knowledge and understanding, which has then impacted them as they've gone into senior as well. So interesting.
Great point. Yeah, great point, art students. And yeah, it really did impact you guys at high school so much, so much more so. Maths, subjects that provoke negative thinking. That's a good one, Mark. Yes. Yeah, online learning because you felt isolated. How interesting, and even though some of you, Rory, I reckon you'd be an introvert, and yet you felt that isolation, which was a real negative, wasn't it? So just because you're an introvert doesn't mean you like being isolated. Yeah, so Kat, one experience was learning that others may not comprehend the way you learn. Very good. Yeah, that's true. Let's keep scanning through. There's so much here. Whoa. Yeah, there you go, Kane. Didn't enjoy science, more feeling than facts. Yep. So again, it's a little bit like maths, English, science, arts. They're opposites. Carla, learning to drive. Your poor sister, terrible teacher. You're oh, look at that. Another family member took over with a different teaching style, which you're related to. And, we actually see that in university as well. You'll be in one class and you just get so much out of it because you might connect more with that person and the way they teach. It sort of aligns to your learning styles a little bit more. And other times, sometimes the teachers have a different learning style, teaching style. And what you got to remember too is it often aligns to their temperaments as well, how they teach. You'll find people like Brie and I probably are more energetic in a classroom, and you'll have others that are more introverted as educators, and they're calmer within the classroom environment. So yeah,
it does just depend. I always love the driving one though, because I think teaching someone to drive is a lot harder than you realize. And so my poor dad, when he was teaching me to drive, I was just like, you were so bad at this. Like, you just can't explain anything. And I really karma came back and bit me, because I have a much younger sister-in-law that I helped teach to drive. And when you can drive, you're just like, you just do it. Just drive, like what? It's not that hard. But it's very tricky to explain it to someone who doesn't know, and you forget the little things that they don't know. So to give your sister her due, it's a hard thing to teach.
It is.
I was like a grade 7 mentor in grade 12, and a grade 1 mentor in grade 6, and explaining how to tie shoelaces is the most difficult thing.
Yes, it's just something that you just know. Hey, it's like almost inherent, and you're like, I don't know, you just do it.
Just tie it.
Yes, so true. That's a great example. So in defense of shoelace teachers and driving teachers, not easy. These are great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, do we have any more special ones to finish with, Tricks? Or
just in relation to canes?
Yeah.
Chelsea says my partner is 25 and can only do bunny ears, so I'm guessing that's when you do one bunny ear, one other bunny ear, and tie it. Oh dear, yes.
Oh well, he gets there in the end.
Yeah, you're right, Kyle. Zip ties for shoes. That was fun. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your stories.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Again, note yours down. So last but not least, I just wanted to alert everyone to Learning Portfolio A, of course. After this is your last module for Learning Portfolio A. So once you've done this and completed these questions, you're well on your way. So these are our 4 questions for Learning Portfolio A this week. So they are a bit, I guess, more complex than the first 2 weeks. So just note that. You can tell by the word count. So this is for the whole module. So all 4 questions. It's about 550 to 800 words. So just keep that in mind. This one will probably take you a bit longer than the other 2 weeks. And you can see here, we've highlighted some words. Again, as I think Virginia said last week and Trix would have said the week before, often these questions have multiple parts. So make sure you read them carefully and you answer each part. And often they'll be asking for specific things. So you can see how it says here, in your own words, describe 2 of these traits. Make sure you do 2. So just keep note of those tricky little things. And try and be quite specific when you respond to these. You know, we don't want to either waffle and go on and on and on, which is my bad habit, but we don't want to be too, too brief to the point where we can't really pull an answer out. So just keep that in mind. If you are worried at all though, or you're not completely 100% sure on Learning Portfolio A, make sure you reach out to your support lecturer or your on-campus lecturer. There's also some really good tips this week in the study guide. So you see here, there's some tips for Learning Portfolio A and reflection. There's also something lots of students freak out about is going over the word count. So there's also some information in there about the word count and how much room you've got. So if you are worried about that, have a close read of the module 3. It's on, I think it's on pages 82 to 86 around there. So make sure you go through there and have a look. So otherwise, all the very best with putting those finishing touches on LPA. And thank you all for joining me for this lecture. I might let Trix finish up the recording for all our online students and then I'll open it up for questions. Thanks, Trix.